around the issue of medicinal cannabis and some of the difficulties that have come to our office about multiple compliance with different states, so different state regimes. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here this evening.
A pleasure.
Nowhere else to be.
On a Wednesday night in Canberra.
Yeah, Wednesday night in Canberra. Well, I've heard, and I'm sure you've heard as well, from clinicians who are so frustrated about the expectation that they'll be able to remain compliant with state-based real-time prescription monitoring programs. And there's a bunch of them, as you know, things like SafeScript, ScriptCheck WA, QScript, SafeScript New South Wales. When those systems don't recognise medicinal cannabis products due to non-standardised naming conventions, custom-loaded medications, inconsistent back-end mapping between the prescribing software and then the real-time monitoring programs. What they're asking for is some steps to have a mandated uniform national system. I don't know if you're hearing these calls and these frustrations, but we're hearing them. Are you aware of the problem, first of all?
So thank you, Senator. Professor Anthony Lawler, Deputy Secretary, Health Products Regulation Group. I think it's safe to say we're aware of a number of problems with medicinal cannabis regulation and access, and we're obviously very active in the space of understanding the broad scope of those challenges, but also reform. Yeah. We've undertaken consultation. Certainly, one of the things we've heard is around the consistency of labelling, dosage forms, and the like. There is a challenge across medicines regulation broadly, which is that while, as the Therapeutic Goods Regulator, we are responsible for certain controls around advertising, manufacture, import, export and supply, the states and territories under their own poisons legislation predominantly regulate how and in what way those medicines are prescribed and accessed.
Yeah, so and so I understand that there's a limit to which you have express, constitutional statutory control. But the end result is this melange, this total mess, where, particularly if you're operating across jurisdictions, but even if you're not, you're trying to come to terms with all these inconsistencies. What the call we've heard is working towards a national standardisation of at least medicinal cannabis medication naming. Like, even if we started there, that would improve accuracy, that would provide some protection as well for prescribers and pharmacists and patients, like the national standardisation of naming conventions.
Yeah, and certainly appreciate that, Senator, and obviously as the custodians of the poison standard, we're very, very keen on a standardised approach. We work very closely with our state and territory colleagues, including through the National Medicines and Poisons Advisory Group, which is in part designed to work towards consistent processes of pharmacy regulation and also pharmacy and prescribing. We have a couple of actions that we feel are likely to arise from our consultation, and part of that will be around how we administer access to medicinal cannabis. One of the challenges that we have currently is that under the regulatory framework, medicinal cannabis is accessed as an unapproved good, which means it's not been assessed for safety, quality or efficacy for inclusion in the ARTG. And what that means is that our ability to apply controls to it, because it's not a registered good on the ARTG, are somewhat limited. What I will do is, I see my colleague Mr McCabe at the table, who we're working with very closely in terms of prescription monitoring and national harmonised policy.
Senator Daniel McCabe, Medicare Benefits and Digital Health. Just picking up on your point about the challenges with medicinal cannabis and terminology, we have a significant piece of work underway with the Australian Digital Health Agency to go through and methodically codify all the different variations of medicinal cannabis. That work is ongoing, and working with medicinal cannabis stakeholders to build out a comprehensive list of terminology under what's known as the Australian Medicines Terminology Framework.
So that would what would be the end product of that for a prescriber, for example? Would it mean that they would be consistent language, consistent methodologies across all the different state platforms? Would that be one of the outcomes?
Part of our challenge, which is why we've been working through this, is that we haven't been able to codify medicinal cannabis to support state and territory scheduling regulation because we haven't been able to identify all of the different variations. So getting nationally consistent terminology will then support state and territories with their real-time prescription monitoring systems to best capture information about.
And are you seeing that as a kind of essential precursor for the work that you're doing, Mr. Lawler?
I think it's safe to say they're complementary, Senator. One of the challenges that we have is that the predominant mechanism we use to control drug names and consistent terminology is through stipulation of how medicines are entered into the Register of Therapeutic Goods. Medicinal cannabis products are not. And that's why we are working towards exploring reform of our regulatory processes towards medicinal cannabis to provide more effective standards and controls on that basis.
Yeah. So, for the purpose of registering for the TGA, what's the institutional block for that?
The institutional block is that, as with other medicines, we undertake an evaluation of safety and quality and, depending on the nature of the medicine, efficacy. And there is a need on the part of a sponsor to demonstrate against those criteria. And the challenge that we have is we only have 2 cannabis-based medicines on the register, and they're for very specific indications. And
this is what's sometimes described as the evidence gap for the efficacy of some of the medicinal cannabis products, to meet the standards or to meet TGA regulations, at least. I'm not suggesting they're not efficacious.
And nor are we in the first instance, but it's not just effectiveness, it's also safety as well.
Right. So the call that I've been hearing is for a national uniform real-time monitoring program credentialing process that removes that administrative duplication, and that requires, in part, your work, Mr. McCabe, in the digital health space.
Yes.
But if that was completed,
that would be an input into the work that we're doing.
There would be an input in the work, but then would it require the sponsorship and those further elements, or is that not essential for?
I might just jump in, if you don't mind. Senator Professor Robin Langham, I'm the Chief Medical Advisor of the TGA. I chair one of our important external working groups, which is the Medicinal Cannabis Expert Working Group. What you're talking about is how we track and trace, if you like, medicinal cannabis products. And we've, through our work on the Expert Working Group, have done quite a bit of work with the organisation that attaches a specific number to each product so that it can be tracked through the real-time prescription monitoring program, and that's CSIRO. And CSIRO run the system which attaches a specific, it's called an AMT number, an Australian medicine, something around the number. But the difficulty that they're having is underpinned by the sorts of things that Mr. McCabe is talking about, which is having a transparent and an understandable and a reliable terminology process, so that CSIRO are able to get something and give it a number. They have attached numbers to 200 of these unapproved products, but there are 1,400 of them in circulation. So
credentialing, numbers, arm twisting, is that kind of where it's going to go?
As Professor Lawler has already said, it would be terrific if drug manufacturers would bring us these products for evaluation so that they could be listed on the ARTG. But whilst they're unapproved, it's absolutely about how we track them. They're Schedule 8 medicines through the real-time prescription monitoring, and that requires a number.
And then, I think also, Senator, if I may, the way you characterise it through to arm twisting, I would preferably describe as the compliance pyramid. But you mentioned the evidence gap and the impediments to registration. I would also say that one of the challenges that we face is that while medicinal cannabis is accessible through an unapproved goods pathway, and frequently through telehealth or face-to-face consultations that are not MBS subsidised, so they're not easily quantified, and similarly scripts that are not PBS, so they're not easily quantified either. The incentive to have a registered product is actually lower than it would be for others. So that's one of the reasons why we see a large volume in unapproved goods approvals, and why we're looking at whether this access pathway is actually fit for purpose.
For the actual, those producing the product, they're not seeing the economic incentive to go through that process.
That's correct.
That's correct, Senator. But through our consultation that Professor Lawler mentioned before, we have had industry submissions where they do see the benefit of having regulatory oversight, and particularly in areas around quality of the product and supporting the quality of the product.
Well, so I think we could explore this more, and just in the time I might move on to another aspect about also medicinal cannabis. It's about the vaporizers and the thread batteries. They're essential administration devices for, I have TG093 compliant medicinal cannabis, but those devices are still classified under consumer vaping regulations, and that makes access difficult, sometimes impossible, legal access at least, difficult or sometimes impossible for patients who need them for legal medicinal cannabis use. Has this issue been raised?
Well, we actually have Mr Jamieson here who can talk to you about how the vaping devices are registered with the TGA and the ARTG. So they are approved products.
Does that include the 510 thread batteries and a suite of vaporizers? So how does it work?
Thank you, Senator. John Jamieson, Medical Devices and Product Quality Division. So the kinds of products you're talking about are medical devices, and so for approval it's the same sort of, loosely speaking, it's quite similar to the medicines approval pathway. So for registration on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods requires a sponsor with safety and performance and quality evidence. There are 2 sponsors of products on the register that are approved through that pathway with 4 products. We've published a list on our website of those products that have that approved pathway. But there are a lot of products that are supplied outside that.
Mr. Jamieson, where would people find that list on the website? Because one of the calls that I'm hearing is to establish a regulated list of certified medical grade cannabis administration devices. You say there is a list somewhere?
There is a list.
It's only 2 devices.
There are 4 devices from 2 sponsors. Yes.
Right. I mean, one of the issues here is the devices, in the broader market are incredibly low cost, and therefore the cost of sponsorship is a significant issue. Is there an exemption pathway for medically required vaporization devices? And it's been suggested to me that that's been used previously for things like glucometers. Is there an exemption pathway?
Senator, yes, there is a pathway for a special access. It's the same pathway for any kind of unapproved medical device. For instance, a glucometer that's not approved, or a CPAP machine that's not approved. Yep. It's through.
Have you been reading my notes? Because the other one was here with CPAP machines. That's got good eyes.
But that requires a doctor to arrange seek approval to supply it for their patient.
So that's a patient by patient process, is it? All right. So that is open, but it's only on a patient by patient. And if you want a sort of system-wide thing, then the sponsorship process is what's got to go through. Is that?
That's right. Yes. The other. We mentioned, or I mentioned before, that there was 2 entries on the register of approved products with 4 devices, and we've published that on our website. other point I will make, Senator, is that we are working with other medicinal cannabis vaping device sponsors towards who have the view for registration.
Okay, so that list may well expand.
Yes.
I've got a bunch of other questions, some of which I could probably put on notice. But one issue again, particularly when I go to Australian growers and Australian manufacturers who are sometimes incredibly frustrated that they're held to far higher standards than importers. One of the things they're calling for is a national framework for labelling consistency, THC percentages, terpene profiles, batch testing. Is there work on track for that national framework for consistent labelling?
Senator, all those issues came very clearly through the consultation process.
Yeah.
So in the very near future, we'll be publishing the submissions and the outcomes from that consultation process, and then we're looking to undertake some more targeted consultations with industry, relevant consumer groups and clinical groups to come up with some options to present to government, particularly around labelling, the regulatory pathways and THC concentration.
So would it be fair to say you've heard that there is a sort of broad push towards this, probably what the devil's in the detail about what it actually looks like?
Yeah, and making sure that we bring all those views together and start to bring together some options.
All right. Thanks very much, Chair.